As we turn back the pages of history, we arrive at the stages of World War II. The year is 1942. In the grand theater of global conflict, the Eastern Front is a pivotal stage. Here, two colossal powers, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, are locked in a desperate struggle. The stakes are high and the city of Stalingrad holds the key. Stalingrad is not just another city, its strategic importance extends far beyond its geographical location. It's an industrial powerhouse, a vital artery for the supply of key resources. For Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, capturing Stalingrad becomes an obsessive objective, an expansion of ambitions that is to prove costly. They underestimate the reserves of the Soviet Union, and they underestimate the determination of a people fighting for their homeland. Meanwhile, Joseph Stalin and the Soviet leadership are making plans of their own, plans that will eventually turn the tide of this epic confrontation. With this stage set, the curtain rises on one of the most pivotal battles of the 20th century, the Battle of Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army, under the command of General Friedrich Paulus, launched the initial assault on Stalingrad in late July 1942. The objective was clear: to seize control of the city named after Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, a city of significant industrial and strategic importance. The initial phase of the campaign saw the German forces achieving considerable success. They managed to capture key areas, including the railway station, the central square, and the Mamayev Kurgan, a dominant height overlooking the city. The precision of the German artillery, coupled with the formidable air power of the Luftwaffe, seemed to be tipping the scales in favor of the invaders. However, this was no ordinary battle. It was a gruesome spectacle of urban warfare, where every street, every building, every floor, and even every room became a battleground. The city was a complex maze of factories, apartment blocks, and rubble, providing ample opportunities for ambush and close combat. Fighting was fierce, brutal, and often hand-to-hand. There was no room for the maneuver warfare that the German forces were so adept at. The casualty count began to rise steeply on both sides. The Soviet defenders, though initially overwhelmed, put up a determined resistance. Men and women, soldiers and civilians alike, fought tenaciously to defend their city. They were fighting not just for Stalingrad, but for every inch of their motherland. They were fighting not just against the invaders, but against the very idea of fascism. As the brutal Russian winter set in, the German advance began to falter. The cold was as formidable an enemy as the Soviet defenders. The German soldiers, ill-prepared for the harsh winter conditions, began to suffer. Their tanks and weapons froze, their supply lines were stretched thin, and their morale began to wane. The initial success started to look increasingly precarious. But as the bitter Russian winter set in, the German advance began to falter. The Battle of Stalingrad was far from over, and the worst was yet to come. Against the backdrop of a harsh winter and diminishing supplies, the Soviet Union launched Operation Uranus in November 1942. The Soviet counteroffensive was a brilliant military maneuver aimed at encircling and trapping the German Sixth Army within the confines of Stalingrad, the city they were so determined to conquer. Operation Uranus was a strategic masterstroke executed with precision and aided by the severe winter conditions that slowed the German forces. The Soviets capitalized on the stretched and weakened German lines, launching their offensive from the north and south, effectively encircling the German forces within the city. Meanwhile, the decision of Adolf Hitler, the Führer of Nazi Germany, to hold Stalingrad at all costs had a profound impact on the course of the battle. Hitler's order for the Sixth Army to stand their ground, rather than attempting a strategic withdrawal, led to the isolation of the German forces. This decision had dire consequences for the German Sixth Army, as they found themselves trapped in a city that was rapidly transforming from a battlefield into a death trap. The German soldiers, unprepared for the brutal Russian winter, were left to fight in increasingly desperate conditions. Food and ammunition were scarce, and the morale of the German soldiers plummeted. The Soviet forces, on the other hand, were bolstered by the successful execution of Operation Uranus and the increasing difficulties faced by the German forces. Hitler's decision to capture Stalingrad, a city of immense strategic importance, had initially seemed like a sound military strategy. However, his underestimation of the Soviet reserves and the resilience of the Soviet forces, coupled with the unforgiving winter conditions, led to a shift in the balance of power. The once conquering German Sixth Army found itself trapped within the city it sought to capture. The tide had turned in the Battle of Stalingrad. The stage was set for the next chapter, which would see the fall of the German Sixth Army and the beginning of the end for Hitler's ambitions in the Eastern Front. With the new year of 1943, the situation for the encircled German forces grew increasingly grim. As the harsh winter set in, the German Sixth Army found itself trapped in the icy grip of Stalingrad, far from any possible relief. The Soviet forces, relentless in their pressure, had effectively cut off all possible routes of escape or resupply. In a desperate bid to salvage the situation, the German High Command launched Operation Winter Storm. This was a last-ditch attempt to break the Soviet encirclement and rescue the beleaguered Sixth Army, but the odds were stacked against them. The Soviet forces were well entrenched and their morale was soaring. They had weathered the initial onslaught and were now in a position of power. Operation Winter Storm, against all hopes, failed. The Sixth Army remained trapped, their situation growing increasingly dire. By the time February of 1943 rolled around, the German Sixth Army was a shadow of its former self. Starvation, frostbite, and relentless Soviet attacks had reduced this once formidable force to a mere husk. The end, when it came, was almost a relief. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, in defiance of Hitler's orders to fight to the last man, surrendered. The Soviet forces accepted the surrender of the German Sixth Army on February 2nd, marking the official end of the Battle of Stalingrad. The toll of this battle was horrific. The German Sixth Army, once a proud and potent force, had suffered massive casualties. The exact number is hard to pinpoint, but estimates suggest that out of the initial 300,000 men, barely 90,000 were left to surrender. The rest had either fallen in battle or succumbed to the harsh conditions and lack of supplies. The Battle of Stalingrad finally came to a close with a resounding Soviet victory. The fall of the Sixth Army marked a significant turning point in the Second World War, a moment when the tide began to turn against Nazi Germany. But the cost of this victory was high, and the echoes of this brutal conflict would resonate long after the last guns fell silent. The Battle of Stalingrad, while a victory for the Soviet Union, exacted a heavy toll. The aftermath of this monumental clash was a sight to behold. The city that once bustled with life lay in ruins, a stark testament to the ravages of war. Buildings were reduced to rubble, streets were littered with debris, and the air hung heavy with the scent of destruction. The human cost of the battle was staggering. Millions of lives were lost, both military and civilian. Each death was a story cut short, a family torn apart, a future unfulfilled. This was the grim reality of war, the price paid for victory. But amidst the devastation, the Battle of Stalingrad had profound strategic implications. It marked a critical turning point in World War II. The defeat of the German Sixth Army was a significant setback for Hitler's forces, shattering their illusion of invincibility. The momentum of the war shifted towards the Allies, turning the tide in their favor. The Soviets, once on the defensive, emerged as a formidable force, their victory at Stalingrad a beacon of hope in the darkened landscape of war. Over time, the city of Stalingrad rose from the ashes, much like the phoenix of lore. It was rebuilt brick by brick, a symbol of resilience and determination. The battle's legacy resonates even today, a stark reminder of the horrors of war and the indomitable spirit of humanity. The Battle of Stalingrad is more than a chapter in history books. It's a story of strategic prowess, of sacrifices made, and of a city that refused to bow down. It's a story of how, even in the face of overwhelming odds, a nation rallied to turn the tide of war. The Battle of Stalingrad, a testament to human resilience and strategic foresight, remains a pivotal moment in world history. In the span of 7 months, the Battle of Stalingrad dramatically altered the course of World War II. From the initial assault by Nazi Germany, the city became a crucible of conflict marked by intense urban warfare and brutal winter conditions. The Soviet Union's strategic counteroffensive not only turned the tide but also led to the fall of the German Sixth Army. This pivotal conflict didn't just signify a major setback for Nazi Germany, but it also marked a significant shift in power, ultimately in favor of the Soviets. The aftermath of the battle was no less impactful. The city of Stalingrad, despite bearing the scars of war, became a symbol of Soviet resilience and determination. The battle's legacy continues to resonate, highlighting the strategic importance of urban warfare, the cost of underestimating an enemy's reserves, and the significance of strategic planning in warfare. From the ashes of Stalingrad, a new chapter in the annals of warfare was written, forever shaping our understanding of conflict and resilience.